Good morning, everybody. How is everybody today? This is Andrew. Hope everybody sorry. Starting a few minutes late today. Sorry about that. I had a class that I was teaching and I ran a few minutes over, so I apologize for starting a few minutes late. Looking forward to doing this month's office hours. Before we get started, just as a bit of a little bit of housekeeping stuff. The way that I like to do these office hours is that I usually start by just kind of sharing a bit of an update on what's new around the Microsoft 365 developer landscape story. For instance, that'll be SharePoint Framework and Microsoft Teams. There's a new SharePoint release that just came out in the last 24 hours. It's only a beta release. There's very little stuff in it, but there is some stuff that is there that I will cover during our chat today. Furthermore, I am also going to then go in and start covering questions from all of you that are joining us live. I have had 2 questions that were submitted to me ahead of time that I'll address those first when we get to the Q&A part. But if you have a question that you've shown up live and you didn't submit it ahead of time, that's all good. If your name is Savvy or Andrew, not me, but a different Andrew, then your questions are in the queue, and I'll definitely take care of those first. But anybody else, you got a question, put it in the chat. I'm also watching Discord, so if you are in my course, one of my students from the SharePoint Framework course or any of my other courses that I have, you should have access to the Office Hours channel in our Discord server. If you don't know about that, if you just head over to, let me open up my chat again. If you just head over to https voitanos.io/discord. If you just head to the link that I just dropped in the chat, you can see how to connect your Voitanos account over to your Discord account, and that will give you access to the Office Hours channel. You will find a post in that channel for today's office hours or this month's office hours for August. And that will allow me to see who's a student versus who's just asking questions in the... Nice, Andrew. Yeah, that's how it feels over here. So you're in Houston. Your climate is almost identical to mine, being in Houston a few times. And 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit with probably about 150% humidity. That's about how I feel as well. But anyway, so if you use that Discord channel, I know that you're a student and you get like priority access on my office hours, so asking questions. So I saw somebody starting to type something a minute ago, but I'll check that again before we get started. We go to the Q&A part. Okay, let's jump right in and talk about the news. A little more housekeeping thing here. Last time we did this, I had a bit of an issue where some of you were getting, I think, an ad from YouTube or from Google or whatever. That should not happen today. If it does, please let me know in the chat. I accidentally clicked. I was trying to get everything started really quick, and when a dialog popped up, I just accepted it away like every developer does and ignores any security things. Not really. But anyway, that popped up and said, do you want to monetize the office hours while you're doing a live stream? Or basically, do you want to monetize your live stream? And I kind of acknowledged it, but I think I must have clicked yes. So those of you who are getting like ads during the live stream, it was my bad. I could not change it after I did that, or at least I don't know how to change it during the live stream. And so I made sure that did not happen today. So looks fine. Also, I think last time I ran into like a weird thing when the audio was kind of echoey. Hopefully that's not the case. If it is, put something in the chat, let me know. But if you can see me and hear me, if one of you can just say, yep, can see and hear audio and video is all good. Yep, cool. Just saw a question come in from Michael D, and yes, I can definitely do that in the Q&A. Okay, so let's go ahead and let me start moving through my slides here. So let me switch over to the screen, put me up, there we go. All right. So this is our office hours. So Who am I? Real quick. My name is Andrew Connell. I've been doing Microsoft 365 development since before it was Microsoft 365. I go back before it was Office 365. Basically, I've been living in the SharePoint development world, which has morphed into the Microsoft Teams and Microsoft Graph. I've been living in this world for over 20 years. Like to consider myself what I call a full stack developer, what the industry calls full stack developer. Microsoft seems to want to call us pro developers or pro code. I don't like that term because pro implies that beginner or intermediate or novice aren't welcome, and that's not true. In my case here, full stack is kind of defined as I build web apps, and those web apps that I build are all those web apps that I build are mostly client side, but then I do anything server side, like with cloud resources in, say, Microsoft Azure, that is going to build and implement those same things. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I've been an MVP for 20 years. Got my 20th award, 20th renewal or 19th renewal back in July, which, talk about making you feel old here. We have this little award on the corner off my shoulder here they give you a different piece. They give you it's a piece of crystal, and they give you these little hockey puck things for every new year you get. And I kind of have like too many going on now. I think I'm supposed to take all the white ones out in the middle and put them down, but then it just feels wasteful. So I'm like, I don't want to throw anything away. Anyway. I'm also the founder of Voitanos, which is I just do all my training and educational self-paced content and stuff inside of my business Voitanos, where I've got self-paced courses on SharePoint Framework. I've got email courses, free email courses on SharePoint Framework, free email course on Microsoft Teams, and also have a Microsoft Teams multi-week accelerator that I'm going to touch on in a little bit because I made a big change to that this month that I'll kind of run through. So let's go. Let me move on to the next slide. There we go. Oh, this is kind of weird. I move my slides and I lose the chat. Let me pin that chat back up here so I can keep an eye on that. So if you just bear with me for a second here, let me change how I've got everything laid out. Will that work? There, I'll just do it like that. Okay. Oh, that's not working either. Crap. All right, whatever. I'll just do my best with this. Let me pop that back out. It's like I've never run a live stream. My bad. Okay, so agenda, again, cover SharePoint Framework first, then I'll cover Microsoft Teams, and then we will tackle your questions. So let's do SharePoint Framework first. The current version of the SharePoint Framework, the production version, is 1.19. This has been the case since going back to April, I think, maybe a little bit farther back. You can see the release notes for this. The big changes that we had here were that Microsoft decoupled some of the developer-specific NPM packages in our SharePoint Framework projects. They decoupled them from the main SharePoint Framework release so that group could iterate on the development packages without having to pin them and just release them the same time and have the same versioning structure, naming convention as the existing SharePoint Framework version. I think basically what happened under the covers is that at Microsoft, they had a bit of a reorg, and the team that was responsible for tools like Heft, which is their mono repo basic building tool, and the group that did, what was it? Some of like the gulp tasks and everything. That team no longer is part of the SharePoint Framework team. They're a separate team. And so they didn't want to kind of have to be beholden to each other. So they basically said, hey, we want to be separate. So they did. And they said now that they can release stuff in different versions with like 2 of the packages I'm listed there on the slide. the net effect to us is like zilch. It's just a little bit, it's a little confusing because it said Microsoft tried to spin it a little bit and say, it makes us be more nimble. We can do more stuff with the dev projects on a separate release schedule. And yet they've not really done anything with that. So those are the two packages that could have a different version than the rest of the SharePoint Framework version stuff that you're using. The other big changes they had, they bumped Webpack from version 4 to version 5. As a lot of us saw in our last office hours, that triggered a lot of issues, especially for those of you who are using the P&P reusable React components or React controls, because things just changed and you had to make some additional changes to your project to get that stuff to work. In addition, they also added in some new data visualization set of templates. That data visualization for adaptive card extensions allows us to be able to have a single or multiple data series that we show on a little chart. If we use the large chart, we can have multiple ones with labels, and we can even define the colors, as you see from those screenshots right there. So 1.19 was a very small release. It looks like 1.20, which came out yesterday as a beta after they had a big screw up in their release, is also going to be a small release by just adding 2 things. So when I say they screwed up, they actually published the beta release as the new SharePoint framework, as the new like generally available release. So if, like, for example, if you tried to create a new SharePoint framework developer environment, and so you did the whole like install the Gulp CLI, Yeoman, and the SharePoint framework generator for Yeoman globally, if you did that yesterday, you actually set up a beta environment if you didn't specify the version. So big boo-boo on their side that they have, that I wrote about in our in the Discord community that we have, as just a heads up. It's been fixed. It's now been fixed. And so now they've kind of fixed it. Essentially what they did is they screwed up the way things were listed in terms of the beta release was supposed to be tagged with the next tag, and the latest tag was supposed to stay on 1.19. Instead, they kind of flopped it around, screwed things up. Surprisingly, it took them almost all day to fix it, even though it was well known early in the day that something was really weird. Regardless, it's been fixed now. So what are we getting in this release? Really only 2 things. One of them, I haven't gone through everything in the changes yet, and if we have time, I'm happy to go through and show you how I do that. I did that a long time ago, but for those of you who are new here, I'm happy to show you how I did that. I haven't picked through all the changes yet. I'm still going. I've started to, but because they were having that kind of release update change, I was going to wait until they made a big change, and then like they did overnight. And then I was going to go through and run my process that gives me a permutation, creates a new project for every permutation project we can create, and then look through all those changes. I've just started looking at that, so we can look at it live together if you like, after I answer the questions. So the 2 things we're getting, building off 1.19 in this ACE data visualization that we have here. So I can pull my slides up and get a laser pointer. I got my laser pointer now. Oh, it's not doing it. Great. There we go. So we had this ACE data visualization that had those 2, that had the line charts that you see. We now have 3 new styles of visualizations that we can use. We can have donut charts, we can have bar charts, and we can have pie charts. So those are 3 new visualization pieces. We don't have much on the documentation for these yet. Candidly, that's my job. And I just found out that the beta was dropping yesterday after it had already kind of dropped. So there'll be articles in the docs for those soon. The other thing that we got, this one's interesting. I'm interested to play with this. This is for the adaptive card extensions. You have these things called card views and quick views. And the quick view is kind of like I click a button on the card view and it pops open a little like widget off to the side. When I pop open that thing off to the side, what we can now do in a quick view is that thing that pops up, it used to just be another adaptive card, but now it can be an HTML view. So you're like, meh, what's the big deal? If it's HTML, I should be able to build a React app that I can put inside of that. So now my quick view can launch a React app that is more reaction, gives me more control than what I can do with an adaptive card. Why would I want to do that? Well, you want more control, and an adaptive card doesn't give you that kind of control. So that's pretty cool. So we'll see how that, I'm interested to play with that a little bit, make sure that the React stuff will work. It's supposed to work. Then again, it's in beta, so we'll see if it doesn't work. We got some stuff to take a look at. But yeah, we'll dig in. I'll dig into that. And I'll hopefully have something for you for our next office hours, or just watch the blog. By the time I think by the time we do our next office hours, 1.20 is going to be GA. I think. I say I think because I know what their plans are, but I also know how their release dates also can change. So we'll see. Okay. So that's my SharePoint Framework news. What's next after that? Just double check, see if any questions. Nope, we're still good on the chat. Just as a quick highlight here, if you recall, in the last few months, Microsoft announced that isolated web parts were going to be going away. Today, they're still there, but if you create a new Microsoft 365 tenant after April the 2nd of next year, of 2025, isolated web parts will not be there. That service will be turned off on newly created tenants after April the 2nd, 2025. And then 1 year later, isolated web parts will be turned off entirely by then. So I talked a little bit about this in the article you see linked at the bottom of the slide. That's an article on my site you can go to. If you just search for isolated web parts, you'll get to that link. Effectively, Microsoft they've only said that they're trying to make things more secure. They imply that iframes are not good, which is how isolated web parts are implemented. They also talk about how third-party cookies are not well supported, which affects like authentication stuff. I think there's ways to get around all that stuff, but regardless, that's what Microsoft has said. Their guidance is that you should find everywhere you're using an isolated web part. They give you a PowerShell script to show you how to do that. I also have a YouTube video that is linked from the article that I have linked here on the slide, which I probably need to put the slide back up. But then they'll tell you that you should find them all, and then you should migrate away from isolated web parts. Before I tell you my guidance, well, I'm going to mix my guidance in with one more thing they've said. My guidance is identify what you've got, but I wouldn't make any changes yet. I would have them make sure you're aware and what your investment is and what your exposure is to this deprecation and retirement. But I wouldn't go actually make any changes yet, because in part of their release announcement, they said that they are working on something to help with the migration. Now, I asked a bunch of questions about this, and cards on the table. I asked them a couple questions trying to get more details on why they were doing the isolated retirement. And some of the stuff I've already shared. The other stuff I'm not clear if I'm allowed to share it or not. So I'm just going to keep my mouth shut for now. But what I will say is I did ask one question that they didn't respond to. So my take on this is that the thing that they're probably working on is giving us a way to still do isolated web parts, but not as a web part, instead as a SPA. So we'll still have that single page that our app is being rendered. Maybe it's from an iframe, maybe not. And it will be mapped to an intra app that we create, that we can assign permissions directly to that intra app. And it's probably just going to say that it's going to accept calls from that one specific URL or from an iframe on that specific URL, instead of having multiple iframes on the page. That's what my guess is. They have not said anything about that. They've not responded to me or anything, so I'm not getting in trouble by telling you what my guess is, because I have no confirmation if that's going to be true or not. But that's where I think we're going with this. Which, I mean, at least it's something. The reason why I say don't do anything, though, about making any changes, because there's no, if we don't know what kind of changes they're making with this, and they're going to release something like that, then I would hate to go through the migration of moving my stuff from isolated web parts to regular web parts or non-isolated web parts, and leveraging the same permissions for the whole tenant, if that was a concern of mine, which I know I have a bunch of companies I've worked with where that is a very big concern, where if you normally grant a permission to a SharePoint Framework component, the permission is granted to the entire tenant, not just to your component. Some companies are like, nope, that's way too permissive. We're not allowing that. I would not go through the process of migrating my stuff when there may be something else that I could migrate to and still get the same functionality I have today. So I would just take inventory. I would not even stop creating a brand new component as an isolated web part if I was doing that. I would just make sure that I keep an eye on the news or follow my newsletter. If you're not subscribed to my newsletter, I will definitely write about this if they make any changes to it. But you can subscribe to my newsletter. Let me drop the link for that in the chat. HPS newsletter.voitanos.io. There we go. For those of you watching the live stream, if you're watching it like the same day we recorded it and you're like, the chat's not showing up and I'm not seeing those links, give it a day. Apparently YouTube takes about 24 to 48 hours to have the live chat get in sync with the recorded live stream. So it'll show up, and you'll see the live chat there. Anyway, that's my guidance around isolated web parts. Let's see. Anything else I want to cover here? For Microsoft Teams, just to reiterate, because this has already come up very, very fast. Microsoft has announced that they are getting rid of Office 365 connectors. Why are they doing this? Well, first of all, Office 365 connectors. I wrote about this in one of my recent newsletters, and it's also an article on my site. If you just go to voitanos.io and just go to the place where all the articles are, you will see one of the recent ones is me talking about this. These Office 365 connectors were basically giving us a way to create installable incoming webhooks inside of Teams. You can see that what Microsoft is doing this year is they've had a very knee-jerk reaction to being compromised back in January as part of the Midnight Blizzard hack by the Russian state actor Nobelium. And so they've had a very big knee-jerk reaction of lock everything down, do a complete inventory of everywhere we have exposure, and get away from it. What part of this is that the Teams group, they maintain a whole infrastructure for doing like webhooks and for Microsoft Teams, and the better way of doing this is running all of that kind of communication from outside into Teams, either using Microsoft Graph, which has been hardened, or use the Azure AI bot service. So you would create a bot that does like a notification style or a proactive message into different channels. That's the way we should be doing stuff. So it looks like Microsoft has said, you know what, that's how you should be doing it. We're going to get rid of this because this level, we don't have this as secure as those other two options. And frankly, they're not really our job. That's somebody else's job to secure those other things. So we're getting rid of this. Really aggressive schedule. So we've already passed the date of when new Office 365 connectors could be submitted to the store. Can't do that anymore. That expired, or that stopped happening about 6 days ago. The tricky thing is that on October the 1st, they're shutting the whole thing down. October the 1st of this year. That's not a typo. So if you go look at the article on my blog, let me just pull that article up and I'll drop that in the chat as well. I have a link here that I'll drop an article in the chat where I show you if you've got an Office 365 connector. Why is it not letting me paste the link? There we go. If you have a Office 365 connector, you can port it to a Microsoft Teams bot. Teams calls it a proactive message. It's also known as a notification bot. And I show you kind of how you would go about doing that in the article that I provide. All right. So that's my Teams stuff. Trending issues that I'm seeing. Oh, those two things aren't supposed to be there at the bottom. Some trending things I'm seeing. It's the same stuff that I had last time, although I do have a little bit more information on it. Around the SharePoint framework, there's this issue, 9514, where people are running into issues with SharePoint framework extensions and the new list UI that's rolling out. The net effect was that there were certain things in, there were some issues around the new list UI where extensions weren't loading, specifically command sets and field customizers. And there's still some issues going on with it. Frankly, the Microsoft did not have some scenarios in their testing suite. This was one of them, and so these guys just never loaded. The community made Microsoft aware of this, and now what SharePoint Online does is it checks to see, does this list have a command set extension or a field customizer extension on it, and if so, use the old list UI instead of the new list UI. You can tell the difference. My telltale way of figuring out the difference is that if I'm on a list, over on the right-hand side where you can change the view where it says all items, the old list UI, all items is on the right side of the toolbar for the current list or document library. The new UI shows the all list as like a tab on the right-hand side closer to the data in the list or the document library. A couple other things is that I'm seeing the Teams FX is being renamed across the board to Teams Toolkit. So for example, if you go to Office Dev / Teams FX, it's been renamed to Office Dev / Teams Toolkit. So the Teams Toolkit is now more encompassing of like a whole bunch of stuff. It's no longer just the Visual Studio extension. So the CLI that they give us, I think it's called Teams App. That is part of the Teams Toolkit. So we have the Teams Toolkit that includes a Visual Studio extension, a Visual Studio Code extension, and a Visual Studio extension. It also has a CLI associated with it and a bunch of other NPM packages. One thing I did notice though is that if you created a new Teams project using the Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code, it's a tab project. Then you use the React with Fluent UI template. What that does is that creates a project that contains an Azure function inside of it. In the last 2 months or so, maybe 3 months, I noticed that it's no longer using an Azure function using the V3 runtime. It's now using the V4 runtime. And as part of that, we no longer have this Teams FX extension that they created for the Azure Functions project. Instead, what they've done is they figured out how to customize the Azure function, the core resource that's created in Azure, to do everything that the extension did, because now the V4 runtime has a lot more support, and specifically giving us the ability to configure the apps that are allowed to call that Azure function. So saying Teams can call the Azure function, and so can and also our Teams app can only call that Azure function. So you'll notice that like the csproj file is gone in the root of the API subfolder. That's intentional because they basically just simplified it. Something that they were adding to it is no longer needed to be added. They can just use the existing Azure Functions core runtime to be able to do that. So that's good. First, it tripped me up, and I was like, did you guys forget this? And it looks like just their documentation was still outdated. They didn't update that part, so that's nice. All right, time for questions. So for those of you who have questions, put them in the chat. I don't have any questions here in the chat, but I've got 2 that were submitted ahead of time, and I saw Michael posted one a minute ago inside of our office hours. So definitely check that out. One thing I do want to mention, I've seen a couple people recently ask questions about doing SharePoint Framework development for on-prem, and some people have asked. I've seen one or two, got a couple private messages people have sent me, but then I've seen a couple of messages that have been asked in the Discord community about doing SharePoint Framework development on-prem and how to set your environment up. I do want to make sure that you're aware that I have a set of articles on my site that I've created. I call it my definitive series for SharePoint Framework developers working on-prem. I'm going to drop this link in the chat. But if you go there, I put this in response to a question in Discord. Effectively what this does, I figured out how to do it for 2016 with Feature Pack 2, 2019, and SharePoint SE. And I walk you through all that stuff. If you don't like the article version, there's a video on YouTube it's linked from each one of those different articles. Okay, let's do the questions. So switch over, questions. All right. So a guy named Savvy, one of my students, asked a question if I've got any inside information about the renewed and upcoming Microsoft 365 developer tenants. Essentially, if you're not aware of what's going on right now, let me drop another link in here. There we go. I'm going to drop another link to an article on my site. What happened was back after that Midnight Blizzard hack, which actually was kind of exposing the developer tenants that Microsoft was giving us for free as part of the developer program. Microsoft locked it down and they said, we're not going to let you create any of these Office 3 or any of these Microsoft 365 tenants right now because we need to do some hardening to the system. And effectively what they did in the article that kind of walked through this is they said, we need to be able to have a way. They haven't said this explicitly, but you can read between the lines. They said, we have to make it to where we can identify every single person that is creating one of these dev tenants so that we can track any bad actors back to an individual. Azure does this by requiring a credit card. Even if you're not going to get charged for anything, they still require you to submit a credit card to get access to the those free credits. I think that's what the 365 guys are probably doing as well with the dev program. Early on when this happened, they talked about the date that we would expect to see this is September. That's nice because that would just be next month. But last week, I was at a conference in Washington, D.C. during the Q&A of the Microsoft panel. I asked a question. I expressed my frustration with how painful this is, especially for developers, especially for people who do like workshops or training classes, how much of a pain this really is. And I was like, can they share any kind of an update? And the answer I got back was basically think closer to the end of the year, maybe beginning of 2025. I don't like the answer, but at least it's resetting the expectations. Unfortunately, it sucks. It is what it is. Here's another option that you've got. Since then, Microsoft has released the Business Essentials SKU, which includes, so you can buy a Business Essentials SKU. I believe it's $6 a month is the base price. It might be a little bit more than that, but it also includes a 30-day trial. So you can at least get a tenant for about a month at no cost. Otherwise, you're getting it for a 1-year commitment at $6 a month, which comes out to about US is what, $360 a year. So not a huge expense, even for an independent developer. $360 if you think about how productive you're going to be with just, what is that, anywhere from 1 to 3 hours of consulting. That should at least, I mean, US rates, right? Then you're thinking that's kind of like, that's not, I don't think that's too bad for the cost of doing business, especially since all of the other tools that we have for development, they're all free. So I personally don't think, purchasing your own tenant, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I understand people who are like, nope, I can't do that. I get it. I totally get it. I wish that we could do it as well. But just give me a little bit. Oh, that's true, Mike. I guess I need to do my math. $72 a year, not $360 a year. Somehow I overinflated. I said I was. Oh yeah, I said I basically in my head was saying 10 months was $60 a year for 360. Well, my math was way off. I don't have courses on math or multiplication. I have courses on SharePoint Framework. Come to me for the right stuff. Okay, that's that one. Next question I have is from Andrew B. Andrew, thanks for the clarification of the question. Andrew, Andrew was in my Microsoft Teams accelerator a couple months ago, and we kind of went back and forth on some stuff, and what I really want to do this for Teams, and probably want to do it also for SharePoint Framework, but I would really like to have a hero app where I have like, someone says, well, how do you do deployment? How do you do like CI and CD? How do you do like real world production stuff? And I would really like to have my own hero app that I'm like, here's how I do it. The question was, are you still doing this? And my answer, yes, I am going to still do it. The next question is, well, when? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I would love to do it. It's still something I do think would be really valuable. And to be completely honest, I'm just swamped. I'm swamped. I'm trying to get my Teams courses out. I have a whole bunch of other stuff I'm trying to work on right now. Thankfully, a big milestone. I just passed a big milestone where I just got word yesterday from the United States. I think it's Patent and Trademark Office, or it might be Trademark and Patent Office. I can't remember which one it is. But just got word that my company name is now trademarked, which, woohoo! That doesn't mean much to you guys, but that's a big deal for me. And then I got some other stuff that I'm looking forward to rolling out over the next few months that I've been working on. But really working hard to get my Teams courses out, as my plan was to really get those out almost a year ago. So working hard to get that done. And that actually leads well into my next question that I got in the chat just a minute ago from Michael, where Michael asked, I can just take the slides off now. Michael said, can you talk about any updates to the Mastering the SharePoint Framework course that I might be working on in the next couple of months, if any changes? And the answer is yes. There are changes that I have planned for it. Again, I'm kind of trying to balance a couple of different things right now. I've stretched myself thin, and over the summer, I've done some kind of reflection of what I need to do to fix some of this, and I'm trying to do a better job of delegating and hiring. So I've like a big change that I've done that I've been trying to get more. I'm trying to get the workflow integrated into how I like to do this stuff. I'm about to really start to put gasoline on this. Is I've hired someone to do all the editing for my videos. So if you've watched any of like the last 4, 5, or 6 videos that I've published on YouTube, that wasn't me producing that. I recorded them and then I handed them over to my producer and just said, have at it. That's a huge removal of like amount of time for me. So like what I'm trying to do is record this Teams class. And the first one that I'm working on building Teams apps and tabs, and give this to him so that his team can start going through and producing this for me, and can kind of work asynchronously. That's going to allow me also to do the same thing with my SharePoint Framework course. I want to completely re-record the Ultimate Bundle chapter on, well, let's see if I can go in order with this. I need to re-record part of the Adaptive Card Extension chapter to reflect the new templates that we have, including the data visualization template. The stuff that I have now still works, but the templates that we create are a little bit, Microsoft refactored the templates, and I need to update the course to show those new templates. That's one. I recently redid the React chapter to incorporate React hooks into the content. So that's in there. I want to re-record the entire chapter on testing because I want to flip that over. Not only do I want to update it for the current version of the SharePoint framework, but I also want to flip it over and get rid of enzyme in that chapter and use testing library, which is the standard now, considering that enzyme is no longer supported in React after React 18. SharePoint framework, we're still React 17. So I don't know if that doesn't really matter to anybody just yet, but it's easier using the testing library. So I want to get that done. I also need to make some updates to the recordings for the in the Ultimate bundle for customizing Gulp, customizing Webpack, now that we're on Webpack 5, updating the CI and CD chapter to show how you can do, well, just to refresh it to be more current, and also to show how you can have a like an unattended deployment without an account that requires MFA. Instead, using certificates and managed identity, user-defined managed identities. The telemetry chapter, the other CI and CD chapter on monitoring and telemetry, update that for the latest version of SharePoint Framework and the Microsoft App Insights, Azure Application Insights for the latest UX there. Things have changed with that. They're in the middle of deprecating instrumentation keys and switching over to connection strings. Plus, they've gone from the V2 to V3 of the SDK, so I want to get that incorporated. I want to do a complete re-record in the fundamentals bundle. I want to re-record the deployment chapter. I want to do a full re-record of that one, just to make it more current. When I teach that live, I kind of make some changes to it. So those are little spot changes that I want to make throughout the course. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head of some updates I want to make. Michael, if you're looking for something specific, like if there's something you feel is outdated that needs to be refreshed, let me know. The way I treat these refreshes is that re-recording a chapter is a big deal. So instead, what I decide to do is that where I can, I try to address changes in the lesson notes or when people have questions. If the tech hasn't changed and just the code has changed a little bit, but then I just update the download. I don't go through a full re-record of it. Like, for example, all of the debugging and the logging stuff or the localization stuff, none of that's changed. So yes, the videos look older when I did the recording of it. Like, I didn't spend as much time with my background looking as clean, or with my lighting, or with the camera being a higher quality camera. I generally don't have plans to re-record that stuff. I'd love to re-record the whole thing, but it's just the priority side, and that's way down on my list. Just being completely candid, but I'm definitely interested in any feedback that you may have. I see you're typing, so I'll keep an eye on that. So that's where I am there. Let me double check and see if I got any other messages in the chat on YouTube. Ooh, you guys have been active. Let me just throw one more thing out there. This week, I announced this just this week. I have a 2-month long got it. Thanks, Michael. I saw a clarification. Mike, he didn't have anything specific he was looking for. He's just curious about what the plans are and what's coming. And he's also working on SharePoint Server 2019 with plans to go to SharePoint Online. But man, it's better. I recently worked with a customer who is on SharePoint 2013, and they were looking to go to 2016 before they went to SharePoint Online. So thankfully, they're not doing that. They're going straight to SharePoint Online. They're just going to skip 2016, which is good. They were an interesting kind of twist to it, because they had to. They're in the GCC High, the Government Community Cloud, I think is what it is, Government Collaborative Cloud, which is more secure. which means that features come to that cloud much later and they have higher requirements. Let me come back to the questions in just a moment. One thing I do want to share with you is that I announced this earlier this week in my newsletter. I have a 2-month-long accelerator. I see a couple of my former students here, and hopefully this doesn't make you too upset. But things change. So I have a 2-month accelerator where I teach Microsoft Teams app dev. It's 4 hours a week, 2 hours of a class on Wednesdays, 2 hours of office hours on Mondays. It's very async, takes about 10-15% of your time, and you work in a small group. In the past, I originally was charging a certain level for the registration, and then I was given some advice by some people in the group that I was in that I should raise my price to a certain level of the registration. So as of the most recent ones, it was regularly $5,000 for a registration for a student to join the class. And I had capped it at about 10 to 15 students. The more I thought about it, it's expensive. And frankly, most people that have a training budget, work for a large company, you don't have a training budget that's that big. So I'll be completely candid. I just decided, I was like, you know what? I think that was a mistake. So I'm gonna roll it back. Now the cost of the registration for the course, the courses are now capped at 25 people. I think I can go to 30, but I'm just gonna go there organically. The size of the class is now capped at 25. But the first 15 seats are available on an early bird price of $2,500 per person. When you work that out over the course of 32 hours of live instruction and kind of hands-on kind of experience back and forth with each other, that's a really low hourly rate for sitting down and working one-on-one with me or in a group scenario, not even including all the asynchronous coaching we get with it. After those 15 seats are reserved, which you can reserve with just a $500 deposit, the remaining 10 seats are available at $3,500 per student. So if you're interested in that and you want to learn more, you want to talk to me about this, I'm kind of in the process of reaching back out to everybody who I had been talking to over the last few months. That's something that I am, just reach out to me, I guess I should say. So my email is andrew@voitanos.io. I'd love to talk to you and love to get you set up with this. So I see a couple of you guys in the chat saying things. So Jono, I appreciate that comment in the chat. Jono was one of my former students, and yeah, so I appreciate that. Check out the site. I've got links to it I'll put a link to where you can learn more and see what a lot of my students have said about the accelerator. But frankly, I just want more people in the class. I think a class size of 20, 25 people is a better learning experience than a class of 5 people. And it's really boiling down to that. I don't want to have tiny classes. I want to have a class of a good size, not huge, but a good size. And I want to charge what I think is fair. So hopefully that would interest some of you. So reach out to me and let me know if you're interested. All right, we got a few more minutes of questions. Let me see if I can run through this. I see Mike and Jono going back and forth. Any questions here I can look at? So Andrew, okay, so Savvy, following up to your question. Cool, there you go. There's an option there, so I'm glad you got that. Andrew, small price to pay for what it costs back in the day to run SharePoint on-prem using a hypervisor. Exactly, that's what I was trying to get to. So I'm glad you have the same thing, so appreciate that. Mike said, to be honest, I had a backup tenant, but I decided to just go buy a real one, a single account, just so I don't have to worry about them pulling the rug in the future. Totally valid. I remember you doing that, so it's a good call. Jono, love React hooks. Me too. I just taught that actually too. That's what I was teaching right before we did this accelerator. Or sorry, before we did our office hours today. Mike, love them for simple state components, just not figured out how to use them for complex state components, so I use class-based components for those. Jono, when using so you guys just went back and forth here. Yeah, so Jono, I agree. Check out the React context. Might help with complicated state management. Mike is asking Jono for a good reference for context. Go check out the class, Mike. I think I talked about the context object, the create context inside the course. I know I cover it inside of the Teams accelerator and some of my team stuff because we use it there. Also, go check out the docs straight from the React team. It's super simple. It's basically, think about it as, instead of having a property that I have to set all the way down my component tree, I create a context at like the top level or some nested level inside my component. And I don't have to drill that property all the way down. Instead, anywhere I'm in a component that is in that tree of where the context was created, you just use the context. It's a React hook, use context. Use the context, you give it the context object, and you get those properties back. So basically, it's like, hey, yelling out to React, hey, I need the context. And it's like, here you go. Current theme is, like in Teams, current theme is light mode or dark mode. So I do teach that in my my Teams accelerator. If you asked about other stuff, I would, if you want to learn more about React and looking for a good React course, if you're not just interested in the out of the box stuff that we get from the Teams group isn't enough, I would look to a guy named Kent C. Dodds. He has a class called Epic React. epicreact.dev. There we go. I'll grab this, put it in the chat. Best example, best course for learning React, in my opinion. No, Jono, I didn't see your permissions. Let me go back and let me check. Oh, there it is. When using the MGT person in a SharePoint provider, does that mean I need to go to SharePoint Client Enterprise app and set the permission for the G? Yes. So Jono, because if you're using MGT inside of the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, if you're using that inside of the SharePoint Framework component, you will need to go grant those scopes that those components need in Graph to the SharePoint Online, whatever it is, the SharePoint Online Client Extensibility Principle or something. The way that I would do that is I wouldn't go do that inside of Intra. I would do that over on the SharePoint admin side. So I would use the way I show it in the course. I think it's on the chapter where I do, well, I have an article where I actually walk through it as well. But in the course, declarative. Let me add that. Let me find that article real quick. I have an article on my site about beware of declarative permissions and how you can use the Microsoft 365 CLI, or you can do it through PowerShell, where you grant the permission to that Intra app, but you do it through the SharePoint Admin Center. I would do that because then those permissions will be exposed to your SharePoint Global Admin instead of having to go all the way over to Intra to go dig that stuff up, because that doesn't seem very obvious to some people. So let me say @Jono. So I just mentioned you and dropped the link in the chat, Jono. That's what, if you go look there, I think I show you how to do that with the CLI a little bit farther down and with the SharePoint Online PowerShell. So that's how I would grant those permissions. I wouldn't do it through the Azure portal. Mike says, in your class size, I think a little larger can't hurt. During most of my any sessions I ran, found people learn a lot just in the input of the class members' feedback. Agreed. Totally agree. So that's why I want to try and get more people in there. In fact, we just did yeah, I see the follow-up that you got there about make sure it doesn't get too large. People can't get speaking up. Yeah, that's the point. That's why I'm trying to say like 25 is good, maybe 30, we'll see. We just did a new thing at a conference last week in Washington, D.C., where myself and Derek Cash-Peterson from Simpraxis, we co-hosted a Microsoft 365 development roundtable. It ended up kind of being a little bit of an AMA, but the point was there were about 10 attendees of the conference in the room, and Derek and I just kind of moderated the discussion. But it was more like we just sit in a circle asking questions, not that people are asking questions of Derek and I. So, went well. All right, everybody, we've kind of gone over a little bit, so I don't want to go too much past past the schedule here. Thank you very much for everybody who came to office hours today. The next one will be on September the 18th at 11 a.m. In the next hour or so, I will be updating, putting this up on the site, scheduling this on our YouTube channel, and I'll have a link to it in our Discord as well, and update the redirect that we have that you can use, the vtns.io/office-hours. It'll redirect to the next one where you can set the little notification bell to get notified when the next issue is coming up, or next office hours session is coming up. With that, I want to thank all of you who showed up live. Tell your friends. We're getting about 10, 15 people showing up for this live. I'd love to get this to be bigger. I know there's a lot more Microsoft 365 developers that want to get the latest news and stuff. If you want the latest news between our office hours, subscribe to my newsletter. That's newsletter.voitanos.io. Every 2 weeks, I give you something that's top of mind for me, just my insights. But then I also grab the most important news that I think that you should be aware of in the Microsoft 365 development space. And I also have some other like fun stuff that's in there as well for those of us who are devs. So with that, that's everything. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. I hope all of you have a great rest of the day. And something corny, go have fun building Microsoft 365 apps. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a great one.